Hi, my name's Holly Searle, but my arty moniker is that of the Subversive Stitcher. Here I am at the Knitting and Stitching show with all 161 of my Subverted vintage tea towels. This was a project that I started in lockdown when prior to that my career was on the up as a textile artist. And then lockdown happened and COVID began, and we didn't know whether we were all going to become an episode of The Walking Dead, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And my brain, that was always influenced by conversations I'd had with friends, things that I'd read or listened to on the radio or seen on the television, suddenly all just became about COVID. So I thought, it's okay, don't panic, your mojo will return. And so I started looking on a well-known auction site at vintage textiles, went down a rabbit hole and ended up looking at these beautiful vintage tea towels, which I call them little domestic works of art. And I just thought they were just so exquisite. So I got some and I thought, I wonder if I can do something with these. And so then I thought about the initial context that was on the tea towel and how I could use that by subverting it with my own words to say something about an issue that was happening in the world or something that was really close to my heart that I wanted to soapbox, and that's how it all started. So that was in 2020, and then every time I get to Christmas I do a Christmas one, so that kind of ends the year. And I was only ever going to do 100, but now I've done 161 because there always seems to be something that needs to be talked about in society. Unfortunately, a lot of them are to do with issues surrounding women, but I really feel, as somebody who was a very quiet kid who didn't ever say anything, I was very shy, I had dyslexia, I was really overlooked at school, and then when I got older in my life, I thought, I can't contain this feeling about not saying all this stuff anymore. And I'd been through all different stages of my life, being a young girl, being a teenager, being a parent, and then now is my time to actually finally have a moment to say all these things that I need to talk about. So I find it really empowering, but I also try not to make it obvious about what I'm saying. I don't ever say, oh, I hate this, because I find that doesn't grab people's attention the way I would have my attention grabbed. So what I tend to do is I try to use a bit of humour as well, so that when people are looking at them, they might go, oh, that's quite funny and I like those colours or whatever, but then they kind of like go, oh, actually that's quite dark and what does that mean? And and so they're quite serious subject matters, quite a lot of them, and I feel it's a really great way to gain attention for those things, because I think that's really important in society. So that's what the Subverted Vintage Tea Towel is all about. There is a uniform font that I use on each of the tea towels, and they're all uniformly used. That font is actually called Cooper's Black, and the reason I use that font in quite a nice, sweet sort of way is because when I was in my kind of Virgo practical sort of way, I was trying to think how I could cut out letters, because I like everything to be quite neat and tidy. So I had a bunch of fridge magnets, so I literally just reversed them, drew around the fridge magnets, and I hand cut each of them out of felt, because felt is such a fantastic, warm, malleable, brilliant fabric to work with, because it doesn't fray, it's easy, it does as it's told sort of thing. So I use those, I use felt, and that's what I use on each of the tea towels. So I uniformly use that font, Cooper's Black, and then the reason I use the pink was what I found quite early on was that sometimes whatever the background was on the actual tea towel, the one that actually stood out the most was the fluorescent pink. And maybe that's a way of like a colourful way of like grabbing attention as well, to like say to people, oh, you know, look at this, it's really, you know, interesting, read me or something. But actually fluorescent pink felt is actually quite difficult to come by. So, and also some of them I do them on backgrounds because you can't actually find a colour that will work on that tea towel. So there's a lot of like scientific technique that goes behind actually creating them as well. And I just use a very simple running stitch. When I do like workshops, it's very easy for people to do. I cut out the letters. I get influenced by, so something will happen. This is how I arrive at a tea towel to make. Something will happen. I'll hear about it on the news, or it might be a conversation I've had with a friend, or something I've read about or listened to on the radio. And I think, I really want to say something about that. So then my brain starts working, and I think, okay, so I find a tea towel that sort of suits that background for that subject matter. And then I have to think about, I don't want to be too wordy on a tea towel, because that kind of detracts from what you're actually trying to say. So I try and keep it as concise as possible. And then I also multiply the impact by giving them all individual titles. So people will find there is the context you have when you look at it, but if you want to find out more about it and you read the title, that really adds to it as well. So that's how I arrive at creating them. This particular tea towel here, I wanted to demonstrate what it was like to go through the menopause. So I tried to find a tea towel that would kind of exemplify the actual physicality of it. So I found this vintage tea towel with this lovely, beautiful rabbit on it in a crazy hat, and I felt that she really kind of like showed what it was like when you're going through your menopause. Probably not all of the symptoms. She's not sweating or scratching or whatever, but and then so that's how this one came about. It's as simple as that. And this one's called The Best Is Yet to Come, because I think that whilst menopause is like quite tricky for a lot of people, it does come to a point where it gets much easier and we become really wise women then. So I think that's a fabulous thing to think. So that's why it's called The Best Is Yet to Come. So this tea towel is called A Posthumous Message via David Attenborough, which is quite sad and dark in itself. But the influence I got from it, I love this tea towel. It's absolutely beautiful with all the animals on it. But one day during COVID, I was out with my daughter in the car, and there was a billboard on the side of the road, and it just said, "Tell them we survived," which was quite, a prophylatic thinking about COVID and all the things we were going through. So I kind of thought about that, and I thought, but if we weren't here, and then I thought about the animals, and I thought about extinction and things like that. So that's why it says, "Tell them we tried to survive," because it breaks my heart that all of these creatures are having to deal with mankind, which is the worst predator, and we're upsetting them in that way and everything. Okay, so this one I created after I like to listen to podcasts when I'm doing my stitching, and I was doing some stitching one day, and I heard this whole podcast on, I think it was on Radio 4, about the Bayeux Tapestry, and about who created it and where they created it and how they created it. And they were talking about the different lists of people that featured on it. And I was just so shocked by that I had to make a tea towel to capture the numbers. So obviously women are the least thing that's featured on that particular Bayeux Tapestry, which was created by women. So I was really, and it's got 620 men. So I can't actually remember. I think this one's called something like Medieval Misogyny, I think this one's called. But this is why I created that one, because I wanted to say something about the irony about women creating a piece of beautiful stitching, and yet they were the least featured person on that. This one is called Knot Nest Monster, and it's to do with the fact that I was listening to a show about this. There's a particular weekend in England where all of these enthusiasts about the Loch Ness Monster go to Scotland to see if they can find it, and it was so awful this particular weekend. The weather was so bad, and it all got just rained out basically, which was really sad for all these enthusiasts that wanted to go up and monster hunt for the monster. So that's why I created this one, which says "No thing to see here." And I love this tea towel. It's it's definitely like 1970s, this tea towel, but it tells you all about the sightings of the monster. So again, it was like a play on what they were looking for and what actually they saw, which was nothing in the end. So I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in to watch this little film about my work. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can. The details will be added to this film. And yeah, so please follow me, because you'll see I'll probably carry on doing it, because there always seems to be something to say in the world. So thank you very much.